Welcome to Richplanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. Now today I will be speaking again with political campaigner, investigator, former social worker and solicitor Tony Bennett. Welcome back, Tony.
Good morning.
Now then, one of your campaigns is to try to prevent new measures in UK education where it is being proposed that children as young as 8 years old are to be taught Darwinian evolution as fact. Now you're vehemently opposed to this policy. Can you explain why that is, Tony?
Many years ago I became a Christian, and when I say became a Christian, that involves accepting the Bible as the Word of God and Jesus Christ as God, exactly as explained in the Bible. And it follows from that belief that the Christian accepts the account of creation given in Genesis, and both the Bible and science are in accord in explaining what we know about the origin of the universe and the way we were created, and the way the animal and plant kingdoms were created, and so on. Now, it is a fact that despite the claims that evolution is a settled fact, and despite its promotion, a very considerable number of people doubt whether the theory of evolution is true. Now, I wrote to the Department of Education about this new policy, which I'll come to in a bit more detail.
Yes,
but if I can just refer to my letter.
Yes, yeah. So this is a letter that you've written to Michael Gove, the Education Secretary.
I wrote this letter on the 15th of April 2013, when I discovered that the new policy of the Conservative Liberal Coalition was to require 8-year-olds to believe evolution, and what the new curriculum requires is that pupils should be taught to recognise that living things have changed over time, and that fossils provide information about living things that inhabited the earth millions of years ago. Now, I want to pull that statement apart in a moment, but by way of background, I in my letter quote a BBC News report dated the 26th of January 2006, and the relevant part says, "Just under half of Britons accept the theory of evolution as the best description for the development of life. Furthermore, more than 40% of those questioned believe that creationism or intelligent design should be taught in school science lessons." Now, people viewing this film, this interview, might be of the view that evolution is a settled fact, that we have evolved over millions of years, Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago, and all this kind of thing. But as is quite clearly revealed in this survey and others, there's a great many people who don't, and who've got an open mind on the issue. And the issue basically is whether children should be required to accept as fact a theory that is disputed by so many people.
Right.
Where we're dealing with scientific facts, like for example gravity, or how far away the sun is from the earth, and all this kind of thing, scientific facts which can be proved, no problem with that. But where it comes to children being forced to accept a belief, which is what I say evolution is a belief and not a fact, then surely children should be allowed to make up their own minds. If you're going to introduce things like evolution, fossils, the rocks, that kind of thing, let's hear both sides of the argument, not just be taught you must believe evolution.
So in terms of the let's just say the age of humanity, because I think, well, they say that mitochondrial DNA studies say that it's between maybe 200 and 250,000 years old, the human genome, if you like. Right. Do you dispute that, Tony? Or?
Well, I know exactly what you're referring to, and the evidence from mitochondrial DNA investigations deals with the alleged origin of the first human female in particular from whom we're descended, and I think we can agree on this, that the evidence from mitochondrial DNA says that we're all descended from one human being at some time in the past. Now, various dates for this In fact, as you know, she's called mitochondrial Eve. Yeah.
Mhm.
So this woman from whom we're all descended, sometime in the past. Now, how far in the past was it? Whether it was, some people say 250,000 years, 200,000 years, 100,000 years ago, it all depends on the rate of mutations, which is what they study. The mitochondrial Eve theory depends on studying the rate of mutations and how quickly they've happened. And as time goes on, of course, there are more and more mutations. And the answer to your question depends on assumptions made about the rate at which mutations have happened.
Right.
This is my best understanding of a somewhat technical subject, but if you slightly change the assumptions about the rate at which mutations have occurred over the generations, then you can quite easily arrive at a date for mitochondrial Eve of between 5 and 10,000 years ago, rather than 200,000 years ago or 100,000 years ago.
So would you apply the same to carbon dating as well? Because if we, I think there's probably, science would allege that there's actual bones, not fossils, which are maybe older than that. Right. That have been carbon dated.
Okay, let's attack the whole subject of what's called radiometric and radiocarbon dating. Two types of dating methods, first of all. Radiometric dating, which is the presence of minerals and chemicals of one kind or another. So you've got things like the potassium argon method of dating,
right,
the rubidium strontium, and it's all about the rate at which there is radioactive decay. The same principle applies with radiocarbon dating, but you're dealing with carbon there rather than other minerals and chemicals. You're dealing with carbon. Now, what I would say to you is that to a considerable extent, radiocarbon dating is fairly accurate, and you can look at that by historically dating certain pieces of wood, for example, typically, and you can use radiocarbon data, measure how much of the parent and daughter radiocarbon element there is, and you can match that with historically known data. And there is quite a good fit between the radiocarbon dates and historically proven dates. Now, the further back you go in time with that, the more potential for error there is. And if we go back 5,000 years or more, the amount of the parent element left in the bones or the wood that you're testing is very small, a kind of trace element. What I would say to you is that by and large, radiocarbon dating is a reasonably accurate method of dating for the past 5,000 years. But when you go back beyond that, you're dealing with such infinitesimal small trace elements of the radioactive parent element that those data are unreliable.
Right, okay.
If we go to the radiometric dating, all these potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium, the whole alleged science of radiometric dating is so shot full with assumptions, inconsistent data, blatant contradictions, that you can't rely on it. So it's not a scientific method. It's
okay. Well, if we look at other species other than Homo sapiens, then, and say, well, some of them show, or science will allege that they are millions of years old. Do you dispute that or not?
Yeah, very, very much so, because quite apart from the Bible telling us, as we believe, the complete history of the universe in outline form, let me make it clear that we believe that Genesis 1 is a strictly accurate, literal account of how the origin of the universe and the earth, man and the animals. That account is a valid scientific account of what happened during the 6 days of creation. It's what we firmly believe, and my beliefs are shared by millions of Christians in all countries around the world. In terms of the millions of years old, what we say is all claims for an age of the earth older than, say, 6,000 odd years are based on a series of unprovable assumptions.
So you would include not only life as being that age, but the Earth itself then?
Yeah. The Earth itself, the whole universe, created about 6,000 years ago.
Right, okay. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, what about this astronomy and the study of galaxies and people extrapolating the movement of galaxies back millions and even billions of years?
Redshift data and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I have to concede that that's not the easiest to explain, but I'm going to leave you with one thought here, and that is that, well, two thoughts I think. First of all, the use of redshift data to date the distance of stars away from us and the length of time in light years and so on. There are major problems with the redshift data. Now, I can't take you in detail to what precisely those problems are, but if you go to any debate on redshift data, it's quite clear that some of the assumptions and findings that have been under serious question by secular scientists. The other main thought I would leave with you is that we assume that the speed of light has always been the same from the beginning of time. It's assumed that it's the speed of light is a constant at 186,000 miles per second, or what is it, 293,000 kilometers per second. But that may be an assumption, Richard. That may not be true. Now, if in fact the speed of light has been deteriorating since the moment of creation, which we say was 6,000 years ago, that would knock out all kinds of calculation about distance and time and galaxies having been created millions of years ago and so on.
I'm with you on, I don't think the speed of light is a constant, and it's to do with the space that the light travels through, in my opinion. That you've got, I'm not sure whether it's the permeability or permittivity of space itself will determine the speed of light, but that's probably another subject as well. But because I actually agree with you that 8-year-olds should not be being taught evolution as fact, but probably for a different reason. So I'm just going to throw this into the pot, Tony, because you said in your letter to Michael Gove, the Education Secretary, that there are really only two rival explanations for the origin of life, which is evolution versus creationism. So I'm going to throw in a third one.
Oh, go on then,
So this is has been written about extensively by researcher Lloyd Pye, who died very recently, and he called that theory intervention theory. So I'll just read what I've written here. His theory contends that throughout the evolution of both the Earth and of species, there has been intervention by what he calls terraformers. He doesn't use the word God. He suggests that man was made by a God with a small g, i.e. advanced beings who once inhabited the Earth, and this comes from the work of Zecharia Sitchin, who at least in part used genetic engineering to create the human species around about 200,000 years ago. He points to anomalies in the human gene pool, such as the second chromosome being two chromosomes fused together, and other evidence such as the functioning of the human brain, and the fact that he claims that there are too many genetic defects in the human gene pool, which suggests that you wouldn't get that many gene defects in such a young 200,000-year-old gene pool. It suggests that it's been cut and spliced and messed with. All right, so he points to evidence of genetic engineering, and then he goes on with his intervention theory to say that there are several key interventions that have taken place to create the conditions on Earth for life, so which we can possibly discuss.
Does he in fact postulate in one form or another a creator or designer then?
He just calls them terraformers.
Or a force or something.
Yeah, some sort of intelligent guiding finger, if you like. But I think he would contend that the theory of directed panspermia, which is the seeding, that the Earth was seeded in various stages with the early single-cell bacteria or single-cell life
from another source somewhere else.
From somewhere else in the galaxy or the universe.
And the evidence for that is?
Well, the fact that two different types appear simultaneously, neither of which could have evolved from each other, and then you've got from single cell life, multiple cell life, with no actual explanation as to how one can evolve into the other. In fact, just the appearance of single cell life in itself. I think there's a quote from Fred Hoyle with the analogy in a junkyard where a single cell life form, which is the most simplest form of life that can exist, is far more complex than a jumbo jet. So for that to occur randomly, it's a bit like throwing a hand grenade into a junkyard and a jumbo jet by accident assembling itself.
Well, you're making my arguments for me then. I'm very grateful to you. I mean, you've actually elucidated one of the key arguments for a creator or a designer, which is that, as you absolutely correctly say, the cell is a hugely complicated, a tiny cell, a hugely complicated mechanism, and you probably know more about it than I do. But I mean, it functions in a I would say a miraculous way, in that in one cell you've got this complex mechanism, and from that one cell can develop you and I with all the features that we have and what have you. It replicates itself, the DNA, and from one cell, 2 cells, 4 cells, and we become in the womb a fetus and a baby after 9 months, and develop into what we are. All the features to produce us are in that one cell, and of course the cell is different for each creation, plant or animal. But can I sort of look at this another way by taking a specific example from the fossil record, which is what this letter is all about. This letter is people should be taught to recognize that living things have changed over time, and fossils provide information about living things that inhabited the earth millions of years ago. Yes, fossils provide information about living things. So they're getting at 8-year-olds through fossils. I'm very happy to discuss fossils, right? That's very important evidence. Let's look at one particular fossil, the trilobite. The trilobite was a creature usually measuring about 1 to 3 inches, and it's found in the very lowest layers of the geological column, the sedimentary rocks, called the Cambrian, or they're also found in slightly higher layers, the Silurian and the Ordovician and so on, but the very lowest layers. Now, in the rocks, in the lowest rocks that we've got, the lowest sedimentary rocks, you've got literally millions of trilobite fossils. I've got couple in my drawer there, produce them, but the millions of them. Now the trilobite has been analysed, and what I'm going to say is recognised science. It consists of 3 separate lobes, hence trilobite, 3 lobes. It's a 3-lobed creature. It's got what I would say is a unique shell made of an extremely strong material. It's a bit like Kevlar carbon, only about 1,000 times as strong. Right. That creature survived under thousands of feet of ocean pressure, so able to withstand huge water pressure and still remain intact as a shell. In addition to that, it crawls on up to 40 pairs of legs, a bit like a millipede. It's got tiny little feet with hairs on them. Perhaps most miraculous of all, it has a complex series of interlocking hexagonal lenses. So if you look at the structure of the eye, because the fossils are so well preserved that we can see how it was structured, several dozen or perhaps 100 or more interlocking hexagonal lenses which interlock to enable the trilobite to see, and also to see in total darkness. So the trilobite had vision through these lenses. Now the point I'm coming to is this: why is that fossil found in the lowest layers of our rocks, the very lowest layers of sedimentary rocks, the first ones to be laid down? Now the evolutionists say these trilobites existed 600 million years ago. What came before the trilobite? So you've got this amazingly complex creature. Can you imagine the amount of DNA needed to produce that shell,
Mm-hmm.
the three lobes, the hexagonal eyes and so on, what came before that? Where do we find in the fossil record, which Michael Gove is saying shows transition over time? What creatures do we find in the fossil record before the trilobite? What
Mm-hmm.
led up to the trilobite?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing, Richard. There's nothing
Yeah.
there. There's
Yeah.
nothing. There's no. This trilobite is just there in the fossil record, fully formed, an intricately designed creature. Where are the antecedents? Where is the origin of this?
Yeah.
It's nowhere. There's no evidence for it. These straight parallel lines of rocks, which you see, most typically in the Grand Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the same rock going on, parallel strips for miles and miles and miles, one after the other. They can only be produced rapidly. They can't be produced over a period of time. And also, incidentally, within these rocks, you often find what are called polystrate fossils, and that is things like fossil tree trunks,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps 70 feet high fossil tree trunks that straddle all these
Right.
strata. So how can it be, for
Right.
example, that a tree trunk 70 feet can be entombed over something that's gradually built over millions of years? It can't be.
Right.
It can't be. So that's another proof that these strata were laid down rapidly. Now, the entire record of the rocks from the Cambrian upwards can, we believe, be explained by the 1 year flood of Noah.
Mm-hmm.
So we say that the evidence in the rocks and the fossils points to this extraordinary cataclysmic event, the 1 year flood which covered the whole earth, and that accounts for what we see in the rocks and the way they're laid out and how they're made up.
All right. Well, I mean, we'll part company on the time scale of it
Yeah.
then. But I guess I'm with you to a degree. I mean, I think that the Genesis was loosely describing real events, but was loosely describing a God with a small g. I don't think God of the whole universe. I don't know who or what that is.
Yeah.
But as it says, they made man in God's image. So therefore, I think that may be true, that there was either Anunnaki, as described by Sitchin, or some other, what's the word that they would use in Egypt, a demigod, that had some sort of superiority over man, and they were trying to create a race to help them, or slave race, some people will call it. And people such as Jordan Maxwell have tried to interpret the Hebrew Bible and come up with slightly different interpretations. In other words, he says that the God, the Elohim, was a congregation of gods, and the God of the Bible was one being from that. That there are other gods, and that the Garden of Eden was some sort of scientific area set up by these beings to genetically engineer Adam and Eve. And it's my belief, and it is just a belief, that this is the Bible's trying to tell you that in a more simplified version, so people can understand it.
Let me explain why we regard the Bible as a source document and a reliable one. First of all, when it deals with verifiable historical facts, things that you can actually verify, it's got an unparalleled 100% record. You look at some of the accounts of the Israelites' campaigns and fights against the Egyptians and the Assyrians and the Babylonians, that sort of thing. All these accounts have stood up. The archaeological confirmation is 100%. There's nothing in the Old Testament that's ever been disproved. Now, there are certain things that can't be proved either way, if you like, and the creation account is one of those. We can't verify that objectively from historical data, but when we listen to Christ's word in the Gospels, he confirms the account of creation. He confirms that personally. This was how the world was created. He confirms the flood as a historical event. So, the person we believe to be God who's come to earth in the form of the Lord Jesus Christ, we look at his words and he confirms personally these events: the creation of the world in 6 days, the fall of man, the creation of Adam and Eve, the creation of all the different kinds of creatures and so on. So that that's why we accept that as fact, and nothing scientific would contradict that. No scientific fact actually contradicts that account of the creation and the flood, and there's a great deal of evidence, we say, to support it.
All right. Well, if we maybe come on to another thing that's mentioned in the Bible, which is when Moses goes up Mount Sinai, and I may be wrong here, but it was around about 2 million people that he was leading.
He was, that's correct,
out of
2 million
out of
plus,
Egypt.
yeah, that's correct, that's absolutely
Now,
correct. Yeah.
And they were following, I think it's described in the Bible as a pillar
Pillar of cloud.
a pillar of fire or cloud or something
Yeah,
like that,
that's
and
right,
it gave shade during the day, and it was fire at night, and they followed it for
40 years.
40 years.
Yes, yeah.
Now, I've speculated that they're following some kind of advanced craft. That
Right.
if that all took place,
Yeah.
that we've got Moses going up to get the contract or the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
That, I think that may well have took place, and it's had a massively powerful impact on these 2 million people. But perhaps that was in that cloudy pillar were beings, but gods with a small g.
Obviously, if you approach the Bible with the point of always looking for naturalistic and not supernatural explanations, you're not going to understand the Bible, because the Bible is, we say, a supernatural book, and it deals with supernatural events, the resurrection of Christ, the raising of people from the dead, and so on. These are supernatural events, they're not natural. But going back to Moses, and there was not only the pillar of cloud or the pillar of fire to guide them along the Saudi Arabian peninsula and what have you, but also the provision of quails. So God provided quails which would come out of the sky and then fall down dead, and that was the meat provided for the Israelites. You've also got the provision of manna from heaven. Now, again, according to the account, according to the written record in the Bible, God provided this substance which has been described as a bit like cornflakes, actually, a bit like kind of honey-coated cornflakes, some kind of food which had got everything that was needed for sustenance. Nobody can quite describe it. It was called manna, by the way, because manna is the Hebrew for what is it.
Right.
So this suddenly appeared, as they entered the Arabian Peninsula. This was found on the ground in the morning, and they ate that food for the day. The other miraculous thing about it was that on the Sabbath, on the eve of the Sabbath, God would provide 2 days' supply, so that people didn't have to go out and gather this on a Sunday, on the Sabbath day, and that was part of, we say, God's provision and reminder that the world was created in 6 days, and that the seventh day was the day of rest, a day of recuperation and rest. So not only have you got to explain the pillar of cloud and devise theories to do with that, but you've also got to account for, where did this manna come from? Where did the quails come from?
And what about, because obviously in Genesis it says that some of the relatives of Adam and Eve, I think, lived for 930, which, again, I don't necessarily dispute that. I suspect that they were maybe just more closely related to the species that were being created. Maybe they were earlier versions, perhaps, I don't know, but I still put the argument that there was some sort of genetic tinkering going on, and maybe it's describing something which happened, as I say, a few 100,000 years ago, that the story was then passed down to be more recent.
As you say, I think Noah lived till the age of 930, Methuselah 985, that kind of thing, and many of these patriarchs are described as living several hundred years. Now, if you look at the account of creation, what was created was a world with no clouds and rain. Right? It describes that this kind of warm, sort of temperate, semi-tropical paradise, teeming with life, and it describes a mist having been part of the creation. No clouds, no weather, just a mist, sunshine and so on. So what you've got is different conditions much better conditions, conditions which facilitate long life. So what you've got basically is pre-flood, ideal environmental conditions for long life. After the flood, what we're living in now is much worse adverse conditions where our life is 73 score years and 10.
Well, let me just put forward this then, that according to science, there was a great oxygenation event which oxygenated the earth. Now maybe the Bible is describing that, but it's simplifying it down to a shorter period for humble human beings to understand and follow. You don't think that because I'm kind of in between here with this intervention theory, I'm saying, a lot of what's in the Bible is probably true, but it's a God with a small g who is actually in charge of man and trying to give man the best rules to live his life by based on what it knows about himself. So it's not the God of the universe, it's a God that's well, maybe come from another planet and perhaps even been involved in seeding the earth, because it's as you say, how do you get single cell life forms from nothing?
Well, it's never been explained. Nobody can explain it, and no evolution textbook can explain how life came from non-life. But when you say science says that this oxygenation event happened 2.4 million or billion years ago, that is a scientist making some assumptions and looking at some data, and I'd have to say to you that is not the settled view of all scientists. It's the view of some scientists, and the whole manner in which we've got from a 6,000-year-old Earth to 13.7 billion years is based on assumptions that are constantly changing and being reinterpreted. Somebody next week might say, actually, the universe is 19 billion years old, or actually, no, it's not 13 billion years, it's 7 years. So, with science shifting like that, can you actually rely on anything that is said at any one time, So that science says no. Science doesn't say that. These are people who believe that they can explain certain data by an oxygenation event 2.4 billion years ago. But I bet you can find other scientists who would disagree with that.
Right. My view is that there is such a thing as what you might call microevolution. In other words, species living in an environment, some will do better than others due to their genetics. Therefore, they'll die out before they get to reproductive age. Their genes are not passed down. You get mutations in the successful people or beings which do get their genes passed down, and therefore that gradually changes the species over time, depending on their environment and survival of the fittest. So, would you say that is a real process?
I would say that you've made a number of statements there which are probably accurate. But need explanation and discussion. You use the term microevolution. Now, clearly, species, there is an element of change going on, and in any one species, what we see is, we see differences. So, if we take, for example, the dog kind. Dogs, we see a great deal of variation. We see wolves, we see foxes, we see dogs, we see dingoes, and so on. We would argue all from an original pair or groups of pairs of dogs. So changes occur, but what we say crucially is that these are all inbuilt variations to the original pair. And let me give human beings as an example. Now we say the science supports us, that all human beings are descended from Adam and Eve. What do we see in human beings? We see a great deal of variety. We see pygmies 3'6", 4 foot in height. We see, some people over 7 foot in height. We see people with blonde hair, with dark hair. We see people with light skin, with yellow skin, with brown skin, with red skin, nearly black skin, so on. All of that can be explained genetically by the variety of genes that were given to the original pair, so that Adam and Eve do not produce clones of themselves. They produce, the genes recombine, so that if you have children, They won't be exact replicas, obviously, of you and your partner. They'll be the genes will recombine to produce a unique individual. So we do see differences, but when you use the term microevolution, what you're saying is that a species can develop new genetic material, and that's the real problem for evolution. Can brand new genetic material be developed so as to produce a new species? It's quite, if we stick with the position of there just being inbuilt variations, some varieties are going to survive better than others from the original pairs. So generally speaking, the creatures with the best genes are going to prosper more than those who've perhaps lost genetic material or haven't got so much genetic material. If we come to the question of where do species get new genetic material from, I don't think you have an answer. The only proposed mechanism is mutations, and the very word mutation means a corruption, really, of what is there already. So a mutation is either a duplication of something, or it's a corruption, a deterioration. It's an alteration of some kind. It's not, Richard, an improvement. No mutation actually improves a species. It's always something less good, inferior to the original. So what is the mechanism for one species to gradually, bit by bit, leap to another? There isn't any mechanism. And besides that, if we draw this back to the fossil record, where is the evidence for one species gradually, bit by bit, over time, transmuting into another species? It isn't there. It's absent.
Lloyd Pye would agree with you on that, that it's what he used to describe as sudden overhauls, complete overhaul.
Yeah, but where's the evidence for sudden overhauls?
Well, the fact that in the fossil record, that for example, he will say that Cro-Magnon man appears 200,000 years ago, bang, and there's no gradual change from Cro-Magnons to any of the what is alleged to come before, which was hominids. Right, so he says that you can't find an intermediate. There should be a lot of intermediate stages, and they're not there.
That's a good point, because what Lloyd Pye is struggling with, and he's honest in this in any way, he can't see the intermediate species, and that's a very important point. Fully agree with him. What Lloyd Pye has done is to try and come up with an explanation for this. And actually, I mentioned Stephen Jay Gould earlier. Stephen Jay Gould was a biologist and evolutionist who recognised this problem. He recognised the fossils showed no example of transitions. He recognised that mutations were not a valid mechanism for evolution.
I mean, in humans they call it the missing link.
Yeah, the missing link. But what he came up with was a theory known as punctuated equilibrianism, or what he called hopeful monsters. And what he was driven, rather similar to Lloyd Pye, he was driven to say that the only possible explanation for the absence of all these missing links, if you like, was there must have been some kind of unknown kind of dramatic thing happening in the genes that suddenly produced, a dinosaur from a bird or something like that. The hopeful monster, punctuated equilibrianism. So it's a theory without a shred of evidence, but devised in order to explain the fact that we do not see intermediate forms or missing links.
Right. Well, with what Lloyd Pye will say about the human genome is that if you look at primates, they've all got 48 chromosomes. Man has only got 46, and you can see by looking at the second chromosome that it's just the second and third stitched together. And he will claim that that can't happen randomly and the species survive. He will say that that's been done using genetic engineering and splicing, and the reason why he says it's being done is because the Anunnaki, who Sitchin has written about, who came to the Earth maybe 500,000 years ago, according to Sitchin, according to, he alleges, the Sumerian stone tablets, they had 46 chromosomes, and they wanted to create a subspecies to be their servant, and they couldn't breed with any hominids on Earth because they all had 48 chromosomes. So they took a hominid from Earth, they stitched two of the chromosomes together, and then they were able to crossbreed and produce a breeding pair, which in the Bible will be described as Adam and Eve.
Right.
So it's kind of telling that story,
Right.
if you like.
I'm not familiar with the work of Lloyd Pye, but it seems to me that he has intellectually grappled with the real problem, which is, and he's a specific one there, which he can't explain. What he's saying is, you can't move from what you said is a 46 chromosome situation to 48 one gradually. There must have been some kind of intervention, to use his word. Yeah. I would simply say to you that what we're dealing with here is a designer. We've got a creator and a designer who has decided that man will have this genetic structure. The ape will have that genetic structure. The trilobite will have that genetic structure. So we see evidence of this magnificent genome consisting of what? Thousands, tens of thousands of little units.
Well, information.
Information, yeah. It's information. And what Lloyd Pye has done is recognise that, that you can't bridge the gap gradually. There are differences. And what he's done is addressed it. How could that have happened? The Bible simply says that in the 6 days of creation, God designed every single plant, every single creature, according to a predetermined genetic plan. What Lloyd Pye has done is, if I may say so, to invent the possibility of some other agency that might have done it this way.
Based on some of the texts in the Sumerian tablets and some genetic... as I said, one of the things he points out is that a young gene pool, which is only 200,000 years old, wouldn't normally have that many genetic defects in it. The human genome's got far more genetic defects than, say, chimpanzees or other species.
So what he's saying is that the number of mutations could not have happened over a short period of time. Then is what he's saying.
It couldn't have gone that wrong if you've got one healthy breeding pair. He says that I think every human being has around about 40 genes that have got genetic defects in them, and I think it's several hundred or thousand across the whole gene pool. And that's far higher than in other species.
What we seem to be recognising here is that there's an original pair, the mitochondrial Eve, and that what's happened is in succeeding generations there have been mutations. Lloyd Pye's argument, and this is shared by a number of scientists, is that there have been so many mutations that this must be spread over 100,000, 200,000 years.
Yeah, that's the dating using mitochondria.
That's right. Yeah. What I would say to you is the answer to this will be in a robust examination of exactly what the data prove in terms of the rate at which mutations have happened. So the argument will be settled in the end by what science says about the rate of mutation. And I would say to you that if we get to look at the original papers on mitochondrial DNA and so on, and if we properly analyse those, and if we look at a range of possible assumptions about the rate of mutations, one of the possibilities is that mitochondrial Eve was only 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. Another range of possibilities at the moment on how you interpret it is that she was 100 or 200,000 years ago. But I'm happy to go with what the data actually suggests, because I don't think they'll conflict with the 6,000 year date for the origin of the universe.
Right. If there is some sort of terraformer, as Lloyd Pye describes it, you would say it's God. If God can do that, then does God not need a creator then?
Isn't this the accident or design argument, more or less? The evolutionists are more or less saying, look, this happened by accident somehow. That somehow non-life became life 4 billion years ago or whatever. And we say no. The creation speaks of design. There's a designer here who's designed each individual creature, plant, uniquely, and that seems to me what Lloyd Pye's argument is here. Is he seems to be pointing to a creator, and what I can't quite understand is why he rejects the very simple creation account in the Bible. What is unscientific about that?
Well, I would say people would argue the time scale of it. That would be the main thing that scientists would point to. I would suggest that it's far longer than it suggests in the Bible.
Which actually brings us back neatly to the very thing that children are going to be taught, which is He says here, fossils provide information about living things that inhabited the Earth millions of years ago. Well, I strongly reject that on the basis of scientific evidence. But let me just kind of go back to some key principles in education. Now, evolutionists say we've got millions of years, and you talk about the time scale must be, much longer, millions, billions of years. We say 6,000 years. What we would like to see is both those arguments held in tension in classes, so that children can...
And the intervention one.
All right, yeah. Other ones can be thrown in. Yeah. But I mean, this is from an education report commissioned in the late 1990s. Education should not attempt to shelter our nation's children from even the harsher controversies of adult life, but should prepare them to deal with such controversies knowledgeably. Educators must never set out to indoctrinate. Educators must never set out to indoctrinate. When dealing with controversial issues, teachers should adopt strategies that teach pupils how to recognise bias, how to evaluate evidence, and how to look for alternative interpretations, viewpoints and sources of evidence. And that's what we seek to do. Give children the two main alternative explanations, creation or evolution. Let them look at the evidence. We'd be very happy for children to examine fossils and discuss how they were formed and how old they were and so on. But give children the facts. Don't tell them you must believe this interpretation or you must believe that one. Don't indoctrinate them either in creation or evolution. Let them know there are two theories, each held by many people. Let them sort it out in their own time, in their own way, which is true. Don't tell them that they must believe this, because that is indoctrination.
There's a TV show called The One Show, which is your tea time TV, BBC.
I haven't got TV, so I haven't seen it.
A chat show, and it was a while back. But they got two TV personalities, and they were creating an argument, but they were both. It was two different flavours of Darwinian evolution, right? So in other words, there's nothing outside of that argument. We're going to have an argument within two different versions of evolution.
That's right.
Which I thought was really bad that they were having that. So I agree with you in principle that they should not be indoctrinating kids with evolution.
I don't mind children being taught facts, but I do object to children being taught that a theory is a fact.
Right.